very stupid o'clock again, everyone, and welcome to my Friday from me and the meows. Welcome to another episode of Spilling Tea. I am your host, Tiffany Daniels. And folks, I finally bit the bullet this morning and went ahead and got the Boston Globe. You want to know why? Because of the epic level shade and truth bombs they have been dropping consecutively and consistently in regards to the Judge Rotenberg Center. And we here in this house, we stand any outlet that is willing to expose the lies and willing to go hard against such a despicable school. So, we bit the bullet, got the subscription. Now, that way you all can enjoy this right alongside with us. Of course, if you would also like to enjoy this beautiful shade throwing and truth telling, I will make sure to include the link in the description. So, disclaimer, there's that. Also, other pertinent links in regards to the Stop the Shocks campaign. Most importantly, the tinplate letters from the ASAN network in order to figure out who your senator representative is in the Senate. Make sure to go ahead and get those letters sent as soon as possible. As soon as the Senate opens back up, they're going to debate whether or not to remove public funding for this horror story of a school. Oh, please. Now is the time to get the pressure on. You make sure your representatives know that you are watching them. Okay. Also, folks, when we are talking about the JRC, you will hear vivid descriptions of, and also sometimes seen clips of actual surveillance footage of people with disabilities being tortured and abused. So, folks, if you have young children present, please use your headphones. Also, we do curse a lot on this channel, particularly talking about the JRC. And in this early in the morning, we do freeze, stumble over our words, and forget our place in the story where we're reading when we start ranting. My apologies in advance. So, what kind of shade am I talking about? Well, this one is from yesterday. We're going to start with the latest, and then we're going to go to another article. And this one states, can't we do better than electric shock as a treatment of last resort? Updated August the 8th, 2021. So this came out just yesterday. Okay. Pain as therapy is only as good as the last shock. Oh my god, I'm here for this shade. This tea tastes exceptionally good this morning. Thank you to the editorial board for examining the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center's use of shock therapy. Electric shock should no longer be a form of student discipline, August 1st. The editorial's last line maintains, the most effective path to eliminating shock treatments would be render them obsolete. Indeed, there are effective paths to that end. However, there are two reasons why ongoing painful aversive treatment goes on. The Judge Rotenberg Center's aggressive approach in court, supported by families who believe it's their best hope, and the fact that limited funding and clinical resources force some families experiencing grievous circumstances to succumb to the center's national recruitment efforts. Remember, we've talked about this. They really target the poor and minority families and neighborhoods. It's really disgusting. Some families have chosen the Judge Rotenberg Center because delays in care or unresponsive officials refuse to address the extreme situations that their children faced. The causes underlying the destructive behaviors exhibited by young people and adults with disabilities are often misunderstood. Addressing them requires significant investment and assessment. Very true. What is universally understood is that pain as therapy is only as good as the last painful shock. We know inflicting pain on human beings causes trauma. Though a strange twist in concept of care, the infliction of ongoing pain upon our fellow human beings at the Judge Rotenberg Center is delivered for their own good. Isn't it only our lack of will and investment that allows these methods to be continued? Nice. Leo V. Sargison, Executive Director, The Arc of Massachusetts, Waltham. Until workable choices are at hand, we have to live with this option. As a friend of Matthew Israel, who founded what is now the Judge Rotenberg Educational Center, I take issue with your editorial, electric shock should no longer be a form of discipline. You argue that alternatives to shock should be developed, noting that the use of shock has been called inhumane, advert a form of torture. However, you fail to fully illustrate the forms of behavior that have been observed before the introduction of shock. According to a paper you cite, before the use of shock, one patient engaged in behavior described as aggressive: hitting, scratching, kicking, headbutting, hair pulling, biting, and spitting on others; destructive, banging, throwing, and kicking objects; and self-injurious, biting and hitting self and head banging. These behaviors resulted in fractures, lacerations, bruising to his face and head, chronic bite wounds to his hands, and severe injuries to staff caring for him, concussions, lacerations, and bone fractures. Such behavior occurred more than 1,200 times a month prior to the use of shock, about 4 times a month after its introduction. If alternatives to shock are eventually developed, fine and well, but until they are, we have to live with what is available. I'd venture the opinion that it would be inhumane, or even a form of torture, to prevent the use of shock in these cases. William Vaughn, Jr., Chesapeake Island, Maine. What a piece of shit. I used to want to live on the East Coast. That's where my dad's family is from. But I am thanking God, or whatever power that is watching over my ass, that I do not live on the East Coast right now. Because if that is their opinion, well, there's no alternatives, so we just have to live with it. You get to live with the torture, okay? Okay, because you're the problem. You're the problem. So you get to deal with the shocks because we can't be bothered to come up with alternatives for you? Viable alternatives? Fucker, there are viable alternatives. How about instead of punishing us for, existing, you get off your ass and, grassroots campaigns. There are alternative treatments. The fact that poorer families and minority families are often excluded from other options due to financial issues, that is the problem that should be being addressed. How to be able to get those people access to the treatments they need. Not, they're poor, so we're going to take and torture their children. That is the most racist line of bullshit I have seen in a damn minute. What the hell? So, let me get this straight. By the way, dude, I hope to God the ARC actually fired your ass. Because the ARC as a whole has come out strongly and condemned this center. They have been out on the streets marching with us with their signs. So I hope they fired your ass. Just gonna say it. When you are basically saying that because somebody comes from a poor background or a minority background, and due to these circumstances over which they have no control, that they must be happy with sending their kids to a school that is going to torture them. Going to go ahead and torture them. that they should just be happy with it. And in fact, it would be more torturous to not send their kids to this school. What kind of messed up, racist, backwards logic is that? What the hell? Maybe instead of being a racist, ableist piece of garbage, saying there's no other way, obviously you know there are. You allude to the fact that you know that there are. How about you work with politicians and other people in order to provide solutions to these families so that they too will have access to the same types of alternative treatments that I had access to? How about instead of torturing people for being disabled while being poor or being a minority, you go ahead and do the right thing to give them access to the damn treatments that they need? Wow. Okay. So, to answer the Boston Globe's question, yes, we absolutely can and must do better. Interesting little letter from that. Thank you for showing me, though, Boston Globe. You've been pretty consistent in throwing the shade on the JRC, so we are going to take a look at another article this morning from them, by the way. So that good whole issue. I'm sorry, hold on. I am still just reeling here. So his idea is not that the other treatments don't exist. It's just we're gonna punish families that can't afford better because of the circumstances in which they are born. They should be happy their kids are getting any treatment at all. That is like mind-blowing level racism and ableism. Mind-blowing. Nobody is a fucking throwaway kid, you son of a bitch. Okay, now here's an article that we kind of briefly went over before. And this is from the Boston Globe. To stop a controversial electric shock therapy, the disability community is owed better alternatives. The FDA banned the treatment, but the courts have overruled the agency. There has to be a better way by the editorial board. It's good to know that the editorial board at the Boston Globe actually stick by their assertions in spite of what assholes like that in Maine have to say about it. Judge Rotenberg Center, once again the center of national controversy over its use of painful electric shocks to treat intellectually or developmentally disabled patients, is a place of last resort. Desperate parents and guardians from all over the country send students to the Canton facility when nothing else has worked, when their loved ones have been kicked out or rejected by other programs, hospitalized for weeks at a time, or subjected to medications that left them unresponsive. Okay, so I gotta tell parents something. This is where you've got to be proactive. I'm not saying you're not being proactive in seeking treatment for your kids. I'm saying you need to start doing your homework. There are reasons why what your kids are being told to do by these medical facilities is not working. You can't just go through treatment after treatment, school after school, with nothing working and not finding out why. What medications are the doctors giving your kids? What is the school programs like at the schools where your kids are getting kicked out? It may not be fair, but you've got to start doing your due diligence. Because you can't just go in there and they say, well, the doctors say it's not working. Well, what is it that's not working? Because that is the sort of thing that is how people like the JRC continue to exist and continue to torture kids. It's this myth that they propagate over and over again that nobody else can help your child. That is not true. That's a bunch of garbage. We need to start holding our medical communities a hell of a lot more responsible than we have been. We gotta do our homework. When they're like, well, this is obviously not working for them, the first question you need to be asking, instead of automatically moving them to another treatment, is ask why. Ask why. What are the issues? Especially with these schools. What are the issues? What is the school actually trying that they're saying isn't working and they're going to kick the kid out of school for? What is that school doing? This is extremely important. All right? Just wanted to get my 2 cents in there about that real quick. Those parents are now the center's most passionate defenders, and they're speaking out as the Food and Drug Administration considers whether to ban the center's use of electric shock devices. Okay, this is obviously an older article. As ghoulish as the treatment seems, some parents insist that it's necessary for patients exhibiting self-interest or aggressive behaviors like biting themselves or headbanging. Again, we've gone over this before. They get a hold of these desperate parents who may not know that they need to be questioning these other treatments their kids are being put through. We've been taught most of our lives, all of us, to blindly trust the medical practices, the treatments our doctors prescribe, but we live in a day and an age where we just can't. We gotta ask questions, because otherwise, like these parents, we'll end up drinking the Kool-Aid. Don't be a Kool-Aid drinker. Start doing your due diligence. Don't just trust whatever the doctors tell you. Yes, trust the science. Know the science. But make sure the medical practitioner or the school you put your child in are following the science, the proven programs themselves. You know what I'm saying? We gotta hold these people accountable. Okay? Now, we've heard the JRC's hard lines. It's a whole lot of victim blaming. They claim every single one of us who are on those shocks at that center are absolutely a danger to ourselves and others. We have proved on several occasions, especially in the case of Jennifer Basumba, that is absolutely not the case at all. So, we're not going to rehash that. The plight of those parents underscores how few options they have. The FDA suffered a setback in its effort to stop the center's use of so-called contingent skin shock when a federal appeals court overturned the agency's ban. That March 2020 prohibition followed a 4-year review that found the treatment's risks, including depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress, outweighs the benefits. But if the FDA appeals the ruling or establishes a more categorical ban, the government needs to create more viable alternatives. I'm going to stop you right there. So, Boston Globe, you are doing your due diligence to a point. But here's the thing. It is not the government's job to create more viable alternatives. It's the government's job to govern and to protect. The fact of the matter is, there already is a lot of other alternative treatments out there. Where the problem comes in, and we just mentioned this a moment ago, is in these poorer neighborhoods, in rural neighborhoods, and in minority neighborhoods, it is a lot more difficult to get access to those type of treatments and assessment than it is even for someone like me in the middle of the freaking Bible Belt. So, what alternative do they have but this school swoops in and promises to save them? You know? But there's that age-old adage. If it seems too good to be true, it usually is. What we should be doing instead, Boston Globe, is working together. The government's job would be not to provide alternatives. The alternatives are already there. They're already working. They are evidence-based. There's tons of data to back them up. What we need the government to do is work with us to be able to find a way to make these viable alternative treatments available, more widely available to everyone, including minority, poor, and rural students. That's just my opinion on the matter. Nobody wants to use contingent skin shock, the center's director, Glenda Cooks, told the Globe during a tour. Oh, Glenda, you are so full of shit, yeah. But ever since its founding in Rhode Island in 1971 as the Behavioral Research Institute, where you killed 6 people, the center has used subversive physical punishments that originally included spanking, pinching, and forced ammonia inhalation. Yes, that sounds like fantastic treatment. For behavioral correction when other treatments failed. But what was those other treatments? That's what we always gotta ask. Parents, Lord, love of God, hear me. Hear me. What are those other treatments? What are these hospitals, doctors prescribing? What are these teachers doing? What is it that they're doing that isn't working? You need to notice exactly. Demand answers. Don't just accept what they're telling your kids failing. No. Demand answers. The center eventually moved to Massachusetts and renamed itself in honor of Ernest Rotenberg, a Bristol County probate judge who halted an attempt by the state authorities to ban it versus in 1986, following the death of a 22-year-old autistic man, Vincent Militek, at one of the center's group homes. Around 1990, the JRC moved on to a new generation of adversives, including electric skin shocks. The shock device consists of batteries worn in the backpack. We already know all this. And we all know about what happened to Andre McCollins. Okay, now apparently 52, so they've added 2 people apparently onto the GED device shots since the ban has been overturned. Oh, treatment refractory. Oh, The center sets a maximum of 10 shocks per day before a clinician must approve further applications and thinks that, on average, students relieve less than 1 application per week. Such major bullshit that we have proven they're full of shit. You give them more than 10 shocks every day, people. Please don't insult my intelligence and the evidence out there. Okay? You shock them for blinking. You shock them for standing up. You shock them for sitting down. You shock them for screaming or being shocked. Okay? regardless of the policies surrounding its use, which they don't use. Many medical experts argue that the device does not fundamentally reform behavior. Thank you. There was some data that people did learn faster, but the point was that once the negative goes away, the old habits come back, said Catherine Lord, a psychiatry professor at the UCLA's Medical School of Progressive Therapy. Oh yeah, she was a real piece of work. We remember her from the FDA documents. The fact of the matter is, aversive therapy doesn't work. It's corporal punishment for existing while disabled. It is corporal punishment for existing, okay? The Judge Rotenberg Center's Director of Clinical Service, Nathan Blinkish, published findings that while electric shocks did reduce the frequency of targeted behaviors by up to 97%, less than 30% of patients observed over 20 years have been successfully removed from the device without recurrence of target behaviors. Thank you, which means they're not working. You are traumatizing people for being disabled. Okay? I can promise you, shocking me as a child when I was doing that self-injurious behavior was not going to stop me. What stopped me was someone caring enough to dig into behind the reason for the behavior and treating that. God forbid there be common sense. Blinkish argues that those numbers don't indicate a treatment failure, though. How do you figure? If it's not going to work long term, how... Oh God, okay. Uses the term prosthetic to liken an electric shock device to other permanent medical devices that meaningfully improve a quality of life. What the hell? What the hell? You really gonna compare shocking the shit out of a kid to having a prosthetic leg? Because last time I checked, having a prosthetic leg doesn't hurt you. Talk about false equivalency. Talk about a stretch. Advocates counter that using permanent threat of pain to modify behavior is inherently inhumane. Yes. In 2010, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Torture called the center's practices torture. Oh no, it's not torture, Boston Globe. It's torture. Call it what it is. Have some balls. The continued reliance on controversial practice is at least a partial consequence of the nation's inability to provide better alternatives. Again, no, Boston Globe. No, that is not what's happening here. The alternatives are there. For the love of God, I live in bumbfuck Missouri, right smack dab in the middle of the damn Bible Belt. And we have better alternatives. That should shame you. That should shame you. Progressive, liberal, East Coast, Missouri, in the Bible Belt is beating you when it comes to treating people with disabilities. We have the data, we have the numbers. And guess what? All of us are doing just fine. We actually work. I know, because I work in the field, Boston Globe. I have worked in the field. I still advise the field on a semi-regular basis. We know there are alternatives out there. Better alternatives than this crap. We've been using them for years. We've been developing them since the 90s. And we have seen huge success. You on the East Coast, up in Maine, up in Massachusetts, y'all should be ashamed of yourselves. I'm just saying. It's a failure of our services that people feel that this is their only option. Maria Sullivan, Director of Government Affairs for the advocacy group, the ARC of Massachusetts, told the Globe. It is not the failure of our services. It is a failure of our governments and the failure of our financial institutions to not provide the funding and making it available for the poor and minority families that need it to be able to provide them with the well-working, evidence-based alternatives that already exist. Families of the Judge Rotenberg Center patients and disability advocates, often at odds, agree on these failures. Okay. So overall, here is my closing thoughts on both of these articles this morning. For me, it's really, really simple. The problem isn't that alternatives don't exist. The problems are the alternatives do exist, but due to resources and finances not being available to poor families and minority families, this school puts itself out to be an only option, and those folks end up taking it. We need to do better. The alternatives already exist. What we should be pressing for, what we should be advocating for, is that these resources be made more widely available to those communities so that poor and so that these minority communities have access to the same alternative treatments out there as I did. That is how we address this problem. All right, folks. And with those thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and close out for this morning. Now, as always, folks, we don't get very many views on this channel, especially on this subject. The few that we do get do tend to get removed from time to time. So please, folks, don't forget to hit that like button. Hit subscribe. Don't forget to hit the comments. I do appreciate your time this morning. As always, we here at Smelling Tea hope you have a good one. Bye-bye.